Welcome everyone to Pow Wow Education Week. Today we'll be working with the Moccasin Identifier Project with Carolyn King. Before we begin though, Maria, could you do the land acknowledgement?
Yes, of course. So as this event is hosted by the university, we'd like to acknowledge that Toronto, where the university is located, is in the Dish in One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect.
Thank you, Maria. I would like to invite Ewan to begin before I introduce and welcome Carolyn King.
Carolyn is former chief of the Mississaugas of the Cote First Nation and has been working for several years now on the Moccasin Identifier Project. And I think, to be fair to everything that you've done, Carolyn, I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Carolyn King. I'm a member of the Mississaugas of the Cote First Nation. I was born and raised over on the Six Nations adjacent reserve, and that I married into New Cote. That's why I become a member of the Mississaugas of the Cote. But I have a bloodline, a good bloodline to the Mississaugas. My grandmother was of the Mississauga Tobico family, and that it's a good bloodline right to the move out of Toronto and beyond. And that's so. We have lots of cousins and family in our community, both communities, and that I've been working with in the community, with the community, and for the community for basically as long as I've been here, and that doing from school education system to community economic development for 15 years to being duty to consult and accommodate when it first came out in 2010, and that so I've been on a lot of representation for the community, promoting and educating about the Mississaugas of the Cote, and not to brag, but received many awards for that, and that I the Moccasin Identifier that we were going to talk about, and we have a slide presentation to go over that. Started from what we call the digital dot. The First Nation was working to identify its significant sites in the treaty lands and the traditional territory, and that it evolved from being a digital dot to today being a like a stenciling program, and that we've been promoting that now for this year is a decade, and that only in the last 2 to 3 years that it has become we've received funding from the Greenbelt, and that it is we've been able to formalize, define it and refine it, and we're now moving into a second stage of looking at permanent sites and creating a network, being partners with people like the Ted Rogers School and that others, and that for those in Toronto, if you haven't been to the Ontario Place Trillium Park and the William G. Davis Trail, then I encourage you to go there. The Moccasin Identifier is at the entrance gate, and it's what we call our signature site. Lots to see, lots to learn there, and a great place to exercise if you get to walk and ride through that area. So with that, I think all those who are coming onto the webinar to thank you for joining and your interest in the Moccasin Identifier, and that you can check that out online and you get a good idea about where we've been and what we've been doing. And if you can join us, I think we have ways that you can become part of what we're doing here, and you'll see some of that in the slide deck that you're going to get. So with that, Chimmy Gwitch, and I brought my eagle feather, did my smudging this morning, so we're all set. All right, I can get started here. You see the our headline there. It's called the Moccasin Identifier. And our goal is to cover Canada with moccasin designs, and you'll see that. We're part of the a project out of the First Nation, supported, and that's where our office is. And that we have a team that works on it. So it's not just me, and that we have lots of partners who you'll see listed further down. And we're funded for a second round by the Ontario Greenbelt Friends of the Greenbelt Foundation. And we want to thank them very, very much. Thank them for their ongoing support. This here's a video, gives you a little description taken right there at Ontario Place, Trillium Park, and the William G. Davis Trail. You'll see us doing some things.
I'm Carolyn King, and I'm a member of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the creator of the Moccasin Identifier. Philip Cote, an artist in Toronto here, took and redrew real moccasins. We're starting over with the children. The idea is that they would research whose land their school is built on, near, or what treaty area they're in. And the educational kit that we have has all that information in there. And the children just love it. My dream is that this province will be covered with moccasin identifiers within the next decade, and they will forever know whose land they're on. That's the goal. Educate and awareness with a nice, simple little program called the Moccasin Identifier.
Okay, very good. You see, get a bit of what we're promoting there, and actually see me stenciling on the walkway at that site. And so we get started here. I say that if we as First Nations people don't get a marker on the ground today, we will be lost forever. So much of our information, so much of our story has been left out, and that as new people come into this country, this continent, we're hoping to create a greater awareness and education about the Indigenous people, which includes the First Nations, the Inuit, and the Métis. This lady here, her name is Nani Ba Kwa Kwe. Her English name is Catherine Sutton, and that she became a leader pushing for Indigenous rights many, many years ago at settlement, and that she was fighting because she married a non-native man. She was taken off of the registry list controlled by Indian Affairs, and that she as a native person, you can't hold land fully except on a reserve. You don't even own it fully on the reserve. So she went with her husband up to around west of the city of Collingwood, but they were going to buy land, and she was told that she couldn't buy land, in which case she petitioned the Queen and even went to see the Queen. So she was an advocate for rights for Indigenous people and the ownership of land. She wasn't successful, but it doesn't change the fact that she fought for rights. She wrote about things, and she, was maybe one of our first women leaders to get the women's rights implemented. In the archaeology work up at her site, because that's now no longer, I've been to the site, so I know what is there or was there, and that it was just remnant farmland and stuff like that. So now I think it's a golf course or something, but they do the archaeology work ahead of time. And so the archaeologists asked, when all the archaeological resources are removed from this site, how will we ever know your people were here? And that's exactly what the Moccasin Identifier is about, to try create awareness. And the simple thing with schools is that we ask the schools to take up the course. We have free online curriculum for the teachers, and that they can buy the kit, which is $100, and that they research whose land their school is built on, near, or what treaty lands they're in. And the curriculum will tell them all of that stuff, and our website. And then as an interactive, to go out onto the sidewalk or on paper, if it's inclement weather, and to stencil a pertinent stencil. We do 4. You'll see that we do 4 representing Ontario, and that most people can do either one. We're not getting real fussy about it. But for the Toronto area, it is the Anishinaabe, the Wendat, and the Iroquois Seneca. So we'll talk later about why we have those 4 moccasins. So people often ask how this came to be, because I noted that we were doing already looking at establishing some kind of system digital, using technology and digitally, can't say it, but using your smartphone or computer, and that you would be able to go to an area, and that you would be able to access information about what's at that site, almost like what you can do with Google or when you're traveling, or in cities now they have these walking tours, and you use your smartphone, and you can just tap into an app, and that it will tell you what's on that site. And so we're working with groups to help create that as well. So the idea is that we will, that we presented about her, Catherine Sutton site, and then out of our audience, they ask, well, what if I don't have a phone, let alone a smartphone? If I go there, what will I see? And like I said, I've been on the site, walked it, and I said, nothing. You wouldn't know that you were on that particular site. And so this suggested that we create a marker or plaquing system, in which case I said, okay, well, let's talk about that. So the next, after the session, we sat down and talked about what it would take to have a plaquing or marker system developed. And it was suggested that we have to have a kind of a universal symbol that people would recognize, and start to use that at significant sites. So they asked, well, what should it be? Should it be like the eagle, which is our totem, which represents the people? And as you see that, the eagle feather is very important to us. And that I said, no, that's too sacred to us. The eagle feather represents something very special to us. Like I have the Order of Canada, an eagle feather is given to you for your good work and your recognition of your support for your community. And so I've had an eagle feather given to me, so basically early 90s, from the community. And that and I tell people, if you don't understand how important an eagle feather is to the First Nations, then you think about the Order of Canada, the highest order in this country, recognizing people's good work. Well, fortunately for me, honored to have both of those. I received the Order of Canada on December 30th of 20, last December. So very honored to be able to say that I have both of those honors. So the eagle feather is important and sacred to us. And then said, what about the dodos? The deer, the different clans that our people are part of. And I said, that's the same thing. Those are too important to us. And it would be really unfortunate if they're painted on the ground, and then that they were walked on and nobody knew what they were walking on. And I said, it would just make us mad again. So we don't want to go there. So they said, Carolyn, come up with something. You have to come up with something by next week, and we'll take it to the government, pitch the idea. So I went back to my office, and I wrote on the wall on my whiteboard, what will identify us and connect us to the land? And I say, it shouldn't have taken me 3 days, but on the 3rd day, I asked that question, what is it? And I said, it's our footwear. And the idea was born. And like I said, began the decade-long journey. Our research, the next thing we did, we started research. It was some support and guidance from some good friends in the art and the museum field, suggested that we visit the Batachou, and that they have been a special partner with us. They give us special access to the moccasin collection to view and to design moccasin stencils. The designs you see and the designs that we use are real moccasins in the Batachou collection. Philip Cote, a leading artist in Toronto. If you hang around, go around Toronto, Philip Cote is the one doing all those big, bright, beautiful murals. So he was our researcher and our artist who drew the moccasins from pictures and viewing them at the museum and to creating the stencil from there. So he has been very supportive of us. And like you can see the various moccasins that represent the different people. We developed a kit, an educational kit that we make available to everyone, but we have been focusing on the schools, elementary schools, and that these 4 designs represent the different groups in Ontario. So the Cree in the north, the Anishinaabe throughout Ontario, the Huron-Wendat, kind of mid-Ontario, from Collingwood over north of Toronto to east. They are in the ground with their artifacts and sites that were there, but they now live in Wendake, Quebec. We have the Seneca representing the Iroquois, Haudenosaunee, as part of the historical context for educational purposes. It was mainly the Seneca who moved in from New York State to try to settle the foot of Southern Ontario. That includes the Toronto area. There are some big sites, archaeological sites, where they put up the longhouses and settled here for maybe a period of what we think is 30 to 50 years. And then they were pushed back across the border, across the Niagara River. And today they live here, the Six Nations. There are 5 other Iroquoian communities or Haudenosaunee communities in Ontario today. So this year, you've seen at the start, we have, and you've seen on the video, the moccasin, where this is the Anishinaabe moccasin, and you see from the real one to the stencil, and then the one that we paint on the ground. And there's 2, we use 2 Anishinaabe moccasins. One is like the plain one, or the bush one, they call it, because they could make a moccasin each day if they needed it. The other one is a more decorated one, and that you see on there all the different designs on there that is part of that original a sample that's in the Bata shoe. We're using these moccasins to create a true connection to the ground, to the land, and that building on our treaty knowledge to learn about it. The treaty area is signed with the governments of the day, and the traditional territory, which may be bigger than the treaty lands as identified when you go look at a map. So I say that we want to change the world one moccasin at a time. And so when you want to change the world, it takes a lot of people. And in this case, we're starting over with the children. And that I said, I have a dream too, that the Moccasin Identifier will be covered. Ontario will be covered with the Moccasin Identifier within the next decade. And we're starting over with the children. And we have found in our work over the past decade and going into thousands of students we've presented to and had them hear about treaty and try to get a basic understanding of what that is, and to have them stencil. And they have thoroughly enjoyed that whole, that process. So it's been very rewarding, and we believe that our little project is the best that it is to help teach. This is the Cree moccasin, one of our favorites. One of our team members did this, and you can see how creative they can be and how beautiful they look on the ground. That's the Cree done in 2 different colors. And if I'm not mistaken, that's at the Toronto Island, that particular one. Here's another Cree. That's the stencil. And you can see when we're in the classroom, it can get pretty messy. We're dealing with paint, non-toxic, safe paint for the children to use. Inside we have to use paper, and we have to protect generally the gym floors and stuff like that. So paper mats and things like that. And our goal is to, as we say here, to advance treaty and Indigenous awareness through education, public awareness, and a network of knowledge for the benefit of truth and reconciliation. What we're working on in our second phase here, Our strategic objectives is to facilitate a cultural shift in Canada by sharing treaty history with children through the distribution of an accessible educational kit. Develop a coordinated branding program to mark significant Indigenous sites for the benefit of the general public. Just envision that if you're in a park along the Humber River, walking up the shared path there, that ideally we'll be able to have a moccasin path there. There is a site there already near the mill pond, a nice pathway for you to follow, and you know that you're on an Indigenous path, which is centuries old, because our people use the Humber as the Carrying Place Trail as a trade route to move up and down from Lake Ontario to Lake Simcoe. We want to form partnerships with communities and organizations to build understanding, engagement, and support. We want to create a network of knowledge on treaties to restore harmony between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people. Here's some pictures of us, our program. We call it the Moccasin Identifier Educational Program. You can become a Moccasin Identifier education leader and teach treaties using the Moccasin Identifier Educational Kit. And things have developed, in this country. There are now, you don't have to create your own event. You can join up with regional or national events. There's the Moccasin, there's the Indigenous History Month in June. There's Indigenous Peoples Day, June 21st. There's Orange Shirt Day, which is September 30th coming up, and what your program is part of. And now it's called Truth and Reconciliation Day. So just marked as a federal holiday. And we have Treaties Recognition Week, which is a provincial program. And there's even an act of the Ontario government to go with that. And that's the first full week of November. And another one day is activity, more, fun, Rock Your Mocks, where they tell you to wear, a moccasin, your favorite moccasins to work that day. And then a new program that has come up in the last, few years, Sacred Path Week, which is coming up with the Gord Downey and Cheney Wenjat Week. And they do lots of programming to create awareness about the residential schools and the Indigenous people. At the Moccasin Identifier, you can install a Moccasin Identifier in your community, public space or work environment, and we'll show up and we'll help cut the ribbon if you want. So we'd be just glad that you start to work with us and become part of our network. A couple of pictures here. This is at Fort York, the first two. That is at outside of the barracks there, and as part of Indigenous Week at Fort York. Through the city of Toronto, and that we go there, and basically every day we take a time to join with people, visitors there, and we stencil the moccasin on the walkways at Fort York. So they've been a great partner with us. In the second one there, that's me with the Moccasin Identifier Kit. It has changed. Now it's just a folder with stencils and information in there, and the information is online now, free for teachers to use, or yourself. And that's me talking to a young group of children, and we had them, come out of there, and a few of them stencil. But it's a program from early on educators. They were from the Cote area. And that third picture is we partnered with the city of Toronto, and during the month of June, we're scheduled to do 10 of their museums. This is Gibson House, which is up northeast side of Metro Toronto. And you see the stencils on the ground. Those are just visitors for that day to that site, and they were able to stencil. We ended up doing 8 sites, not the whole 10. And then just some more information there, a picture of me and the children doing some stenciling. And remember, when you're going to get into it, it's sometimes get a little messy. And this is us again at Fort York. And that's me and Kim Wheatley, cultural specialists. And we're talking to the people. They're talking about the different, the Moccasin Identifier. And this is a school, the Springfield Public School in Mississauga. And that's what the children produced that day in the classroom. We use whatever paint's available, non-toxic tempera paint, chalk spray, And we have the kids, the teachers help us, and we just literally have a tray with a little roller, the little 4-inch roller. Not a lot of big tools to need it, other than the stencil and paper or sidewalk and paint to paper. Here's another, this was a really big event for us. The First Nation is partnered up with the CNE. So we were there for the duration of the CNE. This is a 2019 picture, and that you'll see on the wall behind the people there. We had our booth there. You can see the booth is that we have the little paint tray, paint there for them to use, paper, and that it started with this little girl who, not the one in the picture, but a little girl would come in, and it was right 10 o'clock in the morning, and she wanted a stencil, and she did a nice little stencil. And I said, you can take it home or leave it here. And she says, I want to take it home and put it on my wall. And her mother says, no, you're not taking it. We have to walk around here all day. And she goes, that's wet. And at any rate, I said, well, you know what? How about we just stick it up on the wall? And when you leave to go home, you can come back and pick it up. So that kind of started what you see there. And that week, for the duration of when we were there after that happened, we did over 800 stencils. And you can look at them and how the variety, the creativity, the artistry that comes in from participating in our stenciling event was great. Over 800 stencils were put on the wall. Those are the ones that were just put on the wall. Other people took them home to put on their walls. This is what we call our signature site. This is Trillium Park and the William G. Davis Trail, which was officially opened in June 19th, 2017. The chief was there, our elected chief, our Stacey LaForme, was there to cut the ribbon, along with the governor, the premier of the province of the day. That was the finished product, but that's after 4 years of working with the Ontario Government Ministry. That was a very inclusive project, in which case they talked with the First Nation, come out and visited the community. We promoted it out to people to say that this was this a good idea. It got supported by the council with council motion and the people. I was the team lead. I was the First Nation lead for this project. So, and our Moccasin Identifier becoming part of that whole program. And so today we can use that as a huge example of what the Moccasin Identifier can be. And that it's 15 feet high at its highest point, and it's like 35 feet long. And the moccasin's engraved into two sides of that entranceway. It's a wonderful location, busy, lots of people see it, and that I encourage you to go check it out if you're in the Toronto area. There's another site that's pretty significant, Centennial College in Toronto, Scarborough, as we know it. There's a new building, as you see behind. They created a walkway between the existing building and the new building, and they engraved the Moccasin Identifier. You can't see it on here, but it's in the concrete there. And a little bit further down, there's another seating area for the students, and it's like a half wigwam that people can sit in. And in front of them is the medicine wheel, and so they get introduced to the Indigenous symbols, artwork, and there's a plaque at the start of the Moccasin Identifier. So it's a great partner there. This is one of our current projects. We've actually been on it for several years, and that it's with the Credit Valley Conservation, and that it goes all the way up the Credit River, which is named after us. We're the Mississaugas of the Credit. The city is named after us, and the river, the Credit River, is named after us. And so in the conservation world, it's the Credit River that has and then all the subsequent municipalities that it goes through. And so we've been working with them. They've been very supportive and inclusive, including us. It's the Crane site, which starts up at near the source at Orangeville, and that we're creating a site that will include symbolism for the First Nation, Indigenous people, and that we have an advisory committee made up of a variety of different people, not just the Mississaugas. The designs by Smoke Architect is located at, it's called Island Lake Conservation Area. And we just finished the design 2021, and that as we go forward, we'll be doing some additional, like the implementation. And that little symbol you see at the bottom there with is the logo for our Indigenous experience trail, and then it's the green leaf is for the environment, and the blue feather is for the Indigenous people who, you know, that we're aligned. So we're a strong working group with that on that project, and as you know, hopefully in the next half year, maybe 5 years, that we'll start to see construction of the stuff, all of the elements that we hope to have there. And we're starting to move all the way down the Credit River, right down to the mouth of the Credit. Just to say that we've been on this project for a decade now, and we've been funded by the Greenbelt Foundation to establish and get it more organized and structured. We didn't know it was basically me and Caitlin and the volunteers who'd go out and stand at the booths and present the information about the community and the Moccasin Identifier table. So we've been, diligently working to create that awareness. So our brand has been defined, our website launched, attended over hundreds of events, did a community charrette hosted to get input about what this should look like, presentations to thousands of school children, archaeology sites collected for all the green belt area, for the development of a coordinated marker installation system. The pilot evaluation of the education kit was conducted, and a revised educational kit with the teachers working group. So the educators have had a good part in guiding us and how this program will work well within the school system. We've had partnerships formed with, we call it Indigenous Tourism Ontario, Eco Schools Canada, Toronto Public Library, like the conservation authorities, as we've mentioned, and many more groups. And you see this picture here is actually, I think, at the Springfield School in Mississauga. And so the teacher went out and bought a piece of material that she come back, and then she stenciled the 4 different designs on the material. And her goal was to take it back to her office and hang it on the wall. So that's pretty neat. This year we talk about our treaty lands and our territory. You'll see on the map, the colorful map there, the purple and blue and orange, that those are the different treaties that the Mississaugas of the Credit signed with the governments of the day, some before Canada was even Canada. And you'll see that Toronto is where orange, and that's the Toronto Purchase, 1805. And you'll see there's a black line when we talk about treaty land and traditional territory. Well, the black line describes what we deem our land area, what was. And they that's written very early days between the nations, as to say what your territory was. And over on one of our key funders here, the Greenbelt Foundation, you can see that's the saving of green space and the natural space, the soft fruit in the Niagara Peninsula area. And you can see that it basically fits the same as our treaty lands. And it goes up right up to Wyerton or Bruce Peninsula. And that in the gray area, Toronto, the Greenbelt includes the waterways. So there's lots of opportunity inside the built up areas to continue to do to put sites or to mark the Moccasin Identifier. We've been working with all people who wish to support us. We have a corporate partner right now, and that is the big international organization called Deloitte, and that they are developing new plaques for their head offices, and that in these new plaques, which recognize who, like the land acknowledgement, they're recognizing whose land they're on. They are in agreement, and we're hired to do this, that they will put the moccasin design of the people's land that their corporate buildings sit on. So it's from all across Canada, from Halifax right out to Vancouver. So we have we're working. The team is working on that to research all of those sites across the country. So we're starting to impact across the country through the Deloitte plaques, and you can see just over on the right hand side for the Mi'kmaq. We have the post, and the post is when after they met the indigenous the population, the European population, when it came and started to influence the designs of the people. When you see moccasins that have beads on it or stitched, we're starting to, we call that post design, because they've taken up the new material and used, back in the day, glass beads, and today plastic beads to create wonderful designs. But prior to that, they were more natural. They used natural dyes, and there would have been leather, so that they're a little bit different, and they're more, might say, simpler in that case. We have a good example over on the other one I probably showed in the previous slide about the Huron Wendat. That is done with all natural product, leather, jute, or like the gut lacing, and then the quill are dyed with natural dyes, plant dyes, and so it's a wonderful design and very authentic. And that's, so this is how we're starting to move into national work, and you'll see all the different designs of the moccasins. In the phase 2, which is we're in now, we have 2 additional years of funding. We want to identify sites that are relevant to the history and to the Indigenous people. That Moccasin Identifier Site Installation Guide, develop what it should look like, what it shouldn't have on it, that type thing. We're working on video production, a Moccasin Identifier Symposium, so that we can get the message out on a broader scale. We're meeting with municipalities to engage with them about supporting and taking up the Moccasin Identifier. The Moccasin Identifier Kit distribution, continuing with that as to where it's going to be going. And we have a augmented reality app that we're working on with the Indigenous Tourism Ontario. So lots of activity in the works. These are some of our partners that you'll see there. The Battleshoe has been in for the long haul. Greenbelt, Eco Schools, Parks Canada, Credit Valley Conservation, Ted Rogers School is there, the public libraries. So City of Toronto has been supportive all along, that we start to create an awareness there, and that we hope in the future you'll see us see our Moccasin Identifier all over. To learn about the truth through treaties, participate in Indigenous events, support the Moccasin Identifier, public installations, buy a kit. I mentioned that they were $100 to buy a kit. Teach treaties in your place of work, your community through graffiti art. Join us in changing the world. Our website is themoccasinidentifier.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. This was exceptional. Every time I've heard you speak about this, and every time I hear this or learn about how much there has been these opportunities for education, and because of course we're coming from an educational institution, this is so important for us to learn in which the ways in which we can start sharing this more broadly at the university, and with, of course, the Ted Rogers School of Management, staff, student, faculty, visitors. We have over 12,000 students alone here. One of the things I'm really curious, as you know, certainly our attendees and others will have questions, but one of the questions that comes to mind for me is I would love to get your perspective. You're an entrepreneur as well, and I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the ways in which you think students who are learning about entrepreneurship, the ways in which they can incorporate this Moccasin identifier into their learning as well, because this is an incredibly important place from which we start.
Okay, well, I always like to answer that, well, that they can actually carry out the Moccasin identifier, and they could do their own research on the Moccasin identifier. Like, as we say, that they'll get a teaching moment, which is you research whose land your school or institution is built on, what treaty area it's in, like near, and that it can then they could actually have a stencil and go out and stencil where they have sort of permission to do. Can't go putting it on public streets, because then you become a tag artist. But they could do it with their own friends. A class could take up that cause. We've had the great experience of one of our supporters. She got the kit, and then she had her children do the research about where they lived, and then they engaged the community that if they were agreeable during the month of June, they went out and they stenciled the street and the sidewalks of people who were willing to participate. So that's the kind of engagement we like to see. That's as good as it gets on the ground, and the children, and that we're doing other items with the groups. We've had, his name is Ron McLean. Some of the people may know him as the CBC announcer with Hockey Canada. He's a great marketer, and he took up the cause to promote the Moccasin identifier, stenciled it on the ice, and put it up on his I don't know the name of his program, but it's like Hockey Night in Canada or something, and that he promoted it. Did his own design, a great big one. You'll see behind me, I have a stencil that's about 2 feet long. That and the steel. He got it made up with in plastic, I take it, and that he stenciled it himself, and then he told about what that meant. And so we need supporters across the country like that. So I think that's the easy way to start.
Thank you. There is a question from one of our guests that there is a burial mound in Scarborough on Bellamy Road, just north of Lawrence Avenue East. Is this a location on your list of future sites? Because they would love to see moccasin stencils there.
One of the things that we're trying to not, that site there is already recognized and I'll say profiled, and that we're not looking to put it on sites right on the site. We don't want people coming forth, and I'll say that we know this from history, where people have went in, and once they found out the site, they went through and desecrated it, took things out of the sites, or covered it up because they didn't want people to know it was there. Whatever, there's lots of stories that we don't need to go into. So we would like it to be near something like a burial site. I think that one there that they're probably talking about is the big site. There's actually a mounds out there in Scarborough. I've been there several times to tour the site, and there's others too that we may not even know about yet. So maybe that's information that we need to know. But we would put it, near the area, saying that people lived there and were buried there. And we want to be careful about not identifying those very special sacred sites. So there's a way to do it, just maybe not right on that site.
Thank you. I'm going to offer Catherine, who asked this question, if you would like to speak directly, of course, to Carolyn as well. We can, unmute you and have you be on the video as well. But as we're waiting for some of the next questions, one of the other things, I'm curious about, Carolyn, is I really like this whole approach of the history, from an archaeological perspective and a historical standpoint. Some of how this, the development of both the moccasins in their designs, as Philip Cote has talked about, has the process of developing it, and the archaeological, the sites. How do you, and the app that you were talking about, how do we, is this app accessible to everyone? How do we, when we walk around and think, oh, this would be a great place to stencil moccasins, is this something that we can look up to see if this is a site already marked, for the identifier?
Well, I'll have to say, no, it's not ready yet. We would, we have that idea that there will be a app developed marking it. We do know there are apps out there marking certain sites. In Toronto, they have the first story. It's more of a walking thing. I don't think they have it on an app setup yet, but definitely is that information is in the Toronto area, and then other cities that I'm aware of, like Sault Ste. Marie, they have walking apps, and they identify an Indigenous location or Indigenous people who are there. And that, so I have to say that we as the Moccasin Identifier team don't have that app prepared yet. We want to, that's one of our goals. We are doing AR, augmented reality, and that will be available as we keep working through it and using the technology of augmented reality. The idea is that we would have a moccasin, say, for instance, a moccasin stencil on the ground, that then through technology, it could become a real moccasin back to its original state. And then it can become a person walking in those moccasins or dancing. So we want to be able to entertain and teach at the same time.
Thank you. Yes, I think this is really exciting. I loved some of the ideas that you had already put forward in terms of, wear a moccasin to work day. These are really important ways in which we can, even within our smaller communities, really incorporate and encourage everyone. And I would really, all our attendees today, I would really offer this as an option always to look into how we can share some of these ideas that you've shared with us today and continue to explore ways in which we can bring it both to work, school, homes, and our children and family schools. I think this is so important. Some of the things we hear from students in university is this very deep sense of sadness that they didn't get an opportunity to learn about this in their schools. So, we've talked about this in the past, Carolyn. I think it is so important for us to think of ways in which we can even use the education kits that are used in schools, because some of our students don't have that opportunity to have learned about this. Or even about the land treaties, connections, and as we continue to explore and take this opportunity for education and communication, this would be, I think, one of the first ways in which we could begin.
That sounds great. Yes, it'd be great for them to take up that, and we can see what we can do to help them as much as possible. And that's just with COVID, unfortunately, we can't, we're not going out that much because of the restrictions and things like that, and being safe. So, but doesn't mean that we can't plan for the future and a bigger, better world of moccasin identifiers.
Yes, and I like that even through this, we get the opportunity today to both see this in depth, but also, we continue to see this on the screen behind you, and
Right.
just learn how this comes through, I think has been really important. One of the things that you had talked about, and I want to share this with our audience here today as well, is that, communication has been a big a symbol and a process for the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation as well, especially with the eagle and as that the role that that symbol plays as well. For us to be able to also continue to share this, your presentation today, and in other ways that we can do this, both from the Moccasin Identifier Project steps that you've shared today, but in other ways, from our day-to-day, are there other suggestions and advice that you would have for us in how we can continue to engage both, as the days that we observe come through, but also in the day-to-day, everyday conversations?
Well, my answer to that is that every day we should be grateful that the Creator give you another day on this earth, and that we should do our thank yous, acknowledge the Creator, as for, that you get to be part of this earth, and you thank all the elements of the earth. And I tell people, if they didn't like to understand that, we all have to plan and organize our life on a daily basis, especially if we're into office work or if we have a job. You look at your day book, or your organizer, you look at what you accomplished for the day, you look at what you're doing for the future. And so on that next day, you look back what you need to do, what you said you needed to do for that day. It's like a planning. It's the same thing, saying thank you to Chimigwech, to the Creator, for your life, acknowledging all the elements of the earth is something that we can all do. And I often say, when I start my presentation, I'll say, did you say thank you today? And it takes a step, and what it does is places you in, your space in the whole environment, because you're thanking the Creator for all of the elements that keep you alive. That's my advice for starting every day.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. This was incredible advice. And I want to share, also something that Paula, as one of the attendees today, has shared. She said, I'm part of a community garden that hosts a medicine wheel garden and a community canoe, which brands a moccasin identifier on it.
Oh,
and our plan is to stencil the moccasins on some stepping stones and place them around the garden. It seems that the community gardens would be another great source for engagement. I also just learned about a project called Healing Forests, which looks to create green spaces that highlight reconciliation. Miigwech to you and Philip Cote for creating this project, Carolyn.
Yeah, it's great. That's great. Yeah, and the canoes with the moccasins on it are, as we did a lot of work with the David Suzuki Foundation, and all the canoes that they put in place along the Humber and Garrison Creek there, they went through and re-stenciled or put decals down of the Moccasin Identifier. And it's also at the Toll Keeper's Cottage there. No, that was a great initiative. And we have a new group. They're a canoeing company, and they stenciled the 4 different stencils on their canoe, and they do an annual trip, and they're going from Kitchener-Waterloo area all the way up to the ocean. It's called Speed River to Sea, the Atlantic Ocean there. And he has he blogs and sends updates, and you can see the moccasin stenciled on the side of his canoe. A personal, their personal activity. So it's always been heartwarming to see them send their videos, and there's our moccasin on the site.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I know we've gone a couple of minutes over, but this is a really, really important conversation today. So my thanks to you. We are just so honored to have you here today. And my thanks to all our attendees today and for the questions that came through. Thank you for taking the time to answer those. And we're very, very excited to continue this engagement and to continue to partner with the Moccasin Identifier. And as you said, really spread the word, and it should be everywhere around us. So thank you.
Yep. And everyone have a good day.